everyone. Welcome back to our podcast, No More Secrets. As always, I'm your aunt, Mary Albrecht.
And I'm your niece, Katie Albrecht. And today we wanted to go into a recent memoir that was released by the well-known Matthew Perry. And I'm sure that this is being talked about all over the place.
Yeah.
We obviously know Matthew Perry from Chandler on Friends, which was one of my favorite shows growing up and even into college, and even I would even consider it now. It still is one of my favorite shows. Yeah. And it's fascinating to see how people that can be so charming and funny and like make everyone else feel good, which the show Friends definitely was that for me.
Yeah.
And millions of other people. But then one of the members, and maybe others too, but one of the actors was going through a terrible time in his life.
Over and over again. Through the whole series. And
with
beyond.
Addiction and to both pills and alcohol.
Right.
Is my understanding.
It started with alcohol and went to pills after an injury. Who does that sound like? You know, same as our person Ken.
Yeah, and it's we were just watching the interview, which you guys can probably like see some clips of and stuff, but we were watching one of the interviews from the 2020
with Diane Sawyer,
with on that episode, and there was something else that reminded us of my dad as well.
He would fake illnesses and pain and doctor hop in order to get the pills.
Yes, and even go to the lengths of going to open houses, which stuck out to me, and
that was
going
crazy.
Through their cabinet case to look for any like.
He would go to like a realtor, open house.
Yes.
And go to the bathroom and steal their prescription drugs, and thought he could do it because no one would ever suspect Matthew Perry would steal drugs from us.
Chandler's not going to rob you of drugs.
Exactly, Chandler.
Not Chandler, this guy that has millions who can afford them.
Right, but he couldn't get enough because at one point he was up to 50. He had to have 55 Vicodin a day just to function. So his whole day was spent trying to find ways to get 55 Vicodin a day.
Yeah,
which is ridiculous. Plus other stuff too. He said the whole bottle of vodka each day, the one with the handle, the whole, the big jug. And
for those of you who don't drink, that's a lot of vodka.
And Xanax for anxiety.
And that's crazy addictive as well.
And he did some other stuff like ketamine for a while, and stuff like he was really going through hell. In fact, he writes. At the beginning, he writes, first of all, I thought that was funny. Lisa Kudrow, so Phoebe, writes the foreword. And what I didn't know is that Matthew was the one that kept, I don't know why I'm looking at the camera. Hi.
Hey.
But Matthew's the one that kept them all laughing more than any of them. And the whole reason they were cracking up so hard in that fountain
the iconic
scene in the beginning was because
opener.
It was cold. The water was freezing cold, and it was nighttime, and they had to do it over and over and over again. And he kept them laughing, and that was sincere laughter what they were doing.
Yeah, like it looked like it. You could tell that they were like having a great time. Yeah, you wanted to be in the fountain with them, but it didn't actually sound like that great of an experience because it was cold and wet.
It was so cold. But he said
it's to be wet or something. Yeah,
he did say that he had been in rehab more often than not. He said, I have lived half my life in one form or another of treatment center, in one form or another of a treatment center or sober living house, which is fine when you are 24 years old, less fine when you are 42 years old. Now I was 49, still struggling to get this monkey off my back. And he says at one point in the Diane Sawyer interview that wasn't on that clip, he says that addiction is always waiting right outside your door, doing one-arm push-ups, waiting to get you alone. He said because it's when you're alone that you start spinning. And he even wrote that. He said, I have no fear of talking in front of 20,000 people, but put me alone on my couch in front of a TV for the night and I get scared. And that fear is of my own mind, fear of my own thoughts, fear that my mind will urge me to turn to drugs like it has so many times before. My mind is out to kill me and I know it. I am constantly filled with a lurking loneliness, a yearning, clinging to the notion that something outside of me will fix me, but I had had all that the outside had to offer. It, Julia Roberts is my girlfriend. It doesn't matter. You have to have a drink. I just bought my dream house. Can't enjoy that without a drug dealer. I'm making $1 million a week. I win, right? Would you like to drink? Why, yes, I would. Thank you very much. I'd had it all, but it was all a trick. Nothing was going to fix this. It would be years before I even grasped the notion of a solution. And that is hard. I think we're beginning to understand more, and certainly you and I understand that. You look at somebody and be like, how could they be depressed? How could they be anxious? How could they be lonely? How could they be scared? And you realize that addiction doesn't care if, how successful you are, how you have it all, you really.
At the end of the day, you're just stuck with yourself.
Yep. And so, and that's a hard thing, because I know for me, when I was depressed in high school, I remember Grandma saying, I don't really understand why you're depressed. You have everything that I never had. You have money, you have popularity, you have long, pretty hair, and you're an athlete, and the boys like you. Mm-hmm. And I remember feeling guilty that I was depressed, but realizing that those things don't matter. With addiction, with depression, with diseases of the mind, it doesn't matter if externally it looks like you have everything. That doesn't fix anything,
Right.
And Grandma was that way, she just assumed that if we had money, we would be fine, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that's like the tale as old as time, that money doesn't actually fix everything. Mm-hmm. And the people that don't have it think it will fix things. The people that have it don't want to have it, kind of thing, because it's like it brings a lot to your psyche, or it brings a lot of like backlash that you probably don't even think about. Probably. People treat you different and everything. This is not necessarily related to addiction, but fame in general, I feel like, could really mess up a person.
And you wonder, does fame create something like this in Matthew Perry? But he said that when he was 14, he was partying with some friends. The parents weren't around or whatever, and somehow they got a hold of some wine. And he drank a whole bottle of wine when he was 14, and he felt great. He laid down. He didn't get drunk, but he laid down and just said, I think this is how I'm supposed to feel, because this is great.
Do you remember the first time you got drunk?
Yeah, I think I was 16, and it was in Park Falls.
Okay. Do you remember what it felt like?
Yeah, I mean, I felt great, but I was hungover big time, and he didn't even get hungover.
Yeah.
I felt, it was fun.
It was very fun. I remember, and this is kind of tangent, but I remember, wondering when it was going to start happening. I think I was 17 or 18.
Okay.
When I officially got drunk for the first time, because I kind of held off in high school and stuff because of addiction in my family.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. But once I was like 18 or whenever, I remember like I felt nothing, and then all of a sudden I felt my lips going numb. And I was like, oh, maybe this is what drunk feels like, because my lips are starting to go numb. And I'm like, this is interesting. I kind of like this. And then it moved to the rest of my body and stuff like that.
Did they stay numb? Do you remember?
It just was like that slowing of your whole nervous system or whatever.
Okay, yeah.
That I was feeling.
Felt that way.
And for some reason I felt it in my lips first. And I'll never forget that feeling, because I'm like at this party and I'm like, oh, I've never done anything like this before. I don't party, but I'm kind of liking this. And then, the rest of college is the trend of that and stuff. But
yeah.
The difference is I didn't feel like I needed to go back into that right afterwards.
Yeah.
Even though it was fun, even though I was like kind of experiencing this new sensation and stuff like that, I didn't feel biologically like urged to go drink more alcohol after that. I was like, oh yeah, I'll go party again. But it wasn't like a body thing,
Yeah, it wasn't a physical addiction to wanting more and more and more. It's in fact, it might have been the opposite. Like, ooh, I've had enough. Like that was even the case for me. The next day I was so miserable. That's actually when I started drinking coffee too, because then Mom gave me coffee the next morning.
Yeah, that's what they tell you. If you're with experienced drinkers, they'll tell you like, okay, caffeine will help. Don't worry. Get yourself some ibuprofen, some greasy food, okay?
Yeah. The same thing happened with Ken. I always say, in case there's new listeners, that's my brother, your father.
Yes, he struggled with addiction,
which is why you're my niece.
As one of the issues. Yes, yeah,
one of the issues.
But addiction was a big issue.
But he says, when he was about 16, Grandma and Grandpa gave him a beer too, up in Park Falls.
I was told 13.
Okay, maybe I'm thinking me for 16, but whatever. He loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the taste of it right away. And I didn't really like the taste of beer.
Who likes the taste of beer right away?
He loved it.
I like it now as that I'm an adult, but when I was 17 and had my first beer at Summerfest, awful. It was a Miller Lite, so that's probably part of it, but still awful. Yeah.
It's terrible. It's like coffee. I didn't even like coffee.
No. Me neither.
But
you grow into it.
He loved it. And one time in his adulthood, like maybe about 5 years before he died, he told me that he never, ever stopped craving beer. Even though he had stopped drinking after the Hands accident, there's not a day that went by that he didn't crave a beer. And I think, God, what a miserable way to live.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because you know if you start it, you won't stop, but yet you crave it, you want it. You know, it's just
right.
Yeah.
No, I remember, and I could be wrong on the year, but that was a story that I grew up with. That it was like 13, where he got his first beer, and I, growing up, when I thought his only issue was addiction, got so mad at Grandma for giving him that beer.
Okay.
At 13, because I assumed that early age is the reason why he got addicted, because it was so early on in life.
Okay, yeah.
And then therefore went on to thinking that one beer is the reason for all of our family's problems, because the alcohol is the reason for all of our family's problems, not knowing that he was also very sick mentally as well.
Yeah, before that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before that, and even without alcohol, and, you know, just, yeah, he was a mess. I mean, so that's interesting that he had his first beer when he was 13, because he really didn't drink overtly in our household until he went to Madison when he was 20. So I don't know if he was drinking on the side, but I doubt it.
He might have been sneaking it through high school, which is a relatively quote-unquote normal high school thing to do.
Yeah. But I always thought he was pretty sober, which meant that his mental illness was the problem, because he wasn't really, like, he wasn't a drunk, certainly.
Right.
You couldn't tell, like, you know, especially when you're young like that. So
sure.
But he was mentally ill, even as like a 10-year-old, 8-year-old, you know.
Yeah.
So.
We've since come to the realization that and it's possible he was physically addicted to it too, but it could have been a self-treatment of his mental illness to make his mental illness feel better.
Yeah.
Or something. Yeah,
and he seemed to
self-medicate. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, he seemed to, I don't know if he was physically addicted, because he craved it, so I guess that would be considered physical addiction, but he was able to kind of stop and start without an actual detox program where you're physically withdrawing and shaking and sweating and stuff.
Yeah.
As far as I know. I guess I don't really know, you know.
As far as I know as well, although he was very grumpy when he was off of it, but
yeah.
But when wasn't he? So I don't,
it's hard to tell.
It was all kind of a blur. So.
But it sounds like the thing that really got, I think, Matthew with this book and all, I think he's finally sober and I think he has been for a long time. That's the impression I'm getting.
Okay.
Because the first thing he writes this is his first sentence of his book. Hi, my name is Matthew, although you may know me by another name. My friends call me Maddie, and I should be dead. Mm-hmm. So what happened is...
Sorry, I was laughing at the Maddie part, not the...
Oh, okay.
Not the I should be dead.
Yeah, Maddie. I should be dead.
I know, laughing at the inappropriate times again, but go ahead.
So what happened is this is, I feel like this is, gosh, maybe a couple years. It might even, I don't even know the timing of this when he was in the hospital. It doesn't have a date. But I feel like he just got out of the hospital. I think this was all within the last year, which is why he's still slurring his speech, and he seems kind of slow because he was in a coma for 2 weeks and he was brain dead.
I just looked up is Matthew Perry sober now? And it said, Perry said that he's been clean for 18 months, which means he was newly drug and alcohol free when the Friends reunion, do you remember that? Last year?
Yeah.
Was aired in May of 2021. And he also said he spent about $9 million trying to get sober. Wow. $9 million.
Wow, poor guy.
Oof.
So I think this was his bottom. You know how they say everyone has his bottom? So he hadn't gone to the bathroom he hadn't pooped for 10 days straight. And he got rushed to the hospital and his colon exploded.
Oh!
And he had
oh my gosh.
It just completely exploded. And he... and this is what's interesting. He was in a sober living house when this happened, and they wouldn't take him to the hospital even though he was screaming in pain because for 10 days he hadn't had a bowel movement. Mm-hmm. And they said that he was faking it to get drugs. So they actually tried to block his assistant from taking him to the hospital, but she was like, this is not drugs this time. There's something wrong. His stomach is out to here, and he hasn't gone to the bathroom, and he's screaming like a wild animal, like at the top of his lungs for days. And they tried to block the car. And so she went up on a curb, rushed him to the hospital. His colon exploded at the hospital. And he, let's see, they said he had a 7-hour surgery, and that he had a 2% chance of making it through the night after the 7-hour surgery.
And he survived.
And they put him on a extracorporeal membrane oxygenation machine, which is a machine they call a Hail Mary, like that's the last ditch effort to keep someone alive. And he was one of 5 that was in the ICU on that machine, and the other 4 died, and he didn't. And
that's traumatizing in itself, I think.
Well, and that's what he's like, why am I alive? He's like, I gotta help people. I'm alive and I need to tell this story. If I can help even one person with sobriety, I feel like that's why I'm still alive. And I think that was his bottom. But then he got put on a bag because they had to repair his colon, rebuild it. So he was on a colostomy bag for a long time. He was in the hospital for 5 months. He aspirated, he aspirated about, gosh, how many? I forgot how many. I aspirated into my breathing tube, vomiting 10 days worth of toxic shit directly into my lungs. Enter instant pneumonia. That's when my colon exploded. And then he got an infection, and then he got, he got pneumonia, got an infection, and then he got another intestinal bleed, had to have a surgery, ended up in a coma for 2 weeks, and then was in the hospital for 5 months straight. But he got sober because he was never alone for 5 months. He said that was what did it. He didn't, even in rehab, you'd be left alone sometimes, but no, but there were always nurses, there were always visitors,
Which is probably where this $9 million is probably coming into play a little bit.
Yeah. He said, as I've said, for the entire stay in those hospitals, I was never left alone, not once. So there is light in the darkness. It's there. You just have to look hard enough to find it. So, yeah. Anyway, but that was his bottom. But gross.
I think that's a valid bottom.
So that's when he said, I'm alive. I feel like I need to do something with this. I mean, how much more can his body take? It's hard to know if his body will even come back completely from that. His speech is slurred, and I think that's just because his brain is slow from the years of
drug use and stuff. Yeah.
I mean, God, that's like since college. I mean, since 14 really, but then college he started with he he said he was doing 1,800 milligrams of Vicodin a day, and normally for something like your finger, they'd give you 0.5 milligrams.
They give drugs for this? I didn't get anything.
That's what I was wondering, why you didn't.
No, I was told to take ibuprofen if I needed it, but other than that, no.
Yeah, well,
shoot,
I mean,
missed out.
Yeah, 0.5 milligrams related as opposed to, that's a normal dose for pain, and he was doing 1,800 milligrams a day. You know, so that's ridiculous. And I don't even know how his body survived. It's kind of like your dad. Oh my God. Yeah, it is your dad. It's not my dad. I always get that confused because my dad was sick too.
Ken is my dad, yes.
That's
who you're talking about.
Your dad, my brother.
Your brother, yes.
So, I mean, with all the deaths, I'm confused. Like my husband, my dad, your dad, my brother.
Right. My Pooh. My Winnie the Pooh.
And, but his body could take a lot. I mean, I'm surprised he lived as long as he did, because even with the diet, too.
Yeah, I mean, but I think your body builds up a tolerance.
Yeah.
And when you start doing it every day, then you start to do a little bit more every day. And it's probably like, it's not from 0 to 100. It's like you're incrementally getting up to that point where you're like starting to introduce more drugs. And then all of a sudden you're taking however much, you said 1,800 milligrams or whatever?
Yeah, that's...
Or a whole bottle of vodka because you started at whatever the small portions that you did.
But to I don't understand how he could be so bright on Friends. I mean, he was just sharp. He knew his lines. He had that sense of humor. And that show moved quick. You know, the banter was quick.
It was very quick-witted.
Yeah.
Well, it depends. I mean, I don't know what... It sounds like he was taking downers, too. Like, depressants more.
To kind of
I don't really
counterbalance some of the other stuff he would do.
Yeah, I mean... Like, if he was taking, like the stimulants or whatever, then that could be more... I could understand that, I guess. But people do all sorts of stuff on drugs. Think of all the rock stars that have had, like, drug problems and stuff, but still perform to a live audience with lots of energy and stuff.
And look fine. Yeah, that's true.
Like,
that's
people
true.
can do a lot.
He also said that he came from a broken family. His father left their family when he was, I think, 10 or 11 or something, and then his father married somebody else, and he there's a picture of him in here wondering why he's at the wedding of his dad with another woman when he's like 10 or so. Some really cute pictures in here. My devilishly handsome father and a very confused boy wondering why my father was marrying another woman. I was 10. So he was 10 at the time. And then he goes, cool bowl haircut.
Very, very bowl haircut.
And this is his humor. And the back of the book, he said, "This is me eating a rock. I gave that up in my mid-30s."
That's a very Chandler line, I feel like. He was very Chandler.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Like, I think
I agree.
Chandler's character evolved because of the person that Matthew Perry is. In a good way. Like, the humor and
everything. It was
everything.
a perfect role for him. Yeah.
Yes.
He says, the back says, a raw, unflinching memoir that took courage to write. As it turns out, Matthew Perry has a lot of courage. He takes us through his addiction, his illness, his paralyzing loneliness. Ultimately, this book is filled with hope for the future. If you want to know who Matthew Perry is, stay away from the rags and read this. Stay away from the rags.
So, I guess from this whole thing, because it started in his 20s, right?
Yeah, more or less college, yeah.
And something I'm kind of taking away from this, just from that aspect alone, and the fact that his co-stars didn't know that this was happening, and I'm sure his friends didn't either because he was so good at hiding it, that I feel like we, like, as people, need to start paying attention to our friends that are partying a little too hard in their 20s, which we had Ben come on and talk about that, like his firsthand experience and stuff like that. because in your 20s and in college and stuff, it's so normal.
Yeah, that's what's so hard.
Like, I partied in college. I had my phase, and sometimes I still do party. You know what I mean? But it's like, it's so normal, but there's some people that can't turn it off.
And I think Ben did say that. He said as everyone got older, they stopped drinking as much and stopped going out as much, and he kept going, into his 30s and all that, and then on his own and, alone at work in the desk drawer, the whole thing.
Right.
Ugh. Yeah, it's probably a good idea, to those people that are heading that way early.
You can see it, but you brush it off because you're like, oh, it's just a phase. They'll get over it. It's just a phase. They'll get over it. But it's like, will they?
Yeah.
Unless they get over it, are they going to get over it?
Do you know anybody? Not that you would share the name, but do you know anybody right now that you're concerned about in their 20s? I mean, I'm pretty far away from anyone in their 20s.
With drinking, well, I don't know, just addiction in general. Yeah, there's people I know. But it's hard to it's again one of those situations. How do you sit them down and talk to them about it?
Well, that's
also depends on the relationship with them.
On that little clip that we watched, Jennifer Aniston was like, we weren't equipped. Like, they were young and on this insanely popular show making millions, and they didn't know how to deal with addiction and sadness. I mean, it was supposed to be the best time of their life, and so she was crying on there because she felt bad because they didn't know what to do. They didn't even know it was a problem necessarily at first,
Right.
And
that's sad.
Yeah, and that's that is really sad.
But also, now I'm going back on my statements. Was that their role to tell him to stop?
They didn't really. They
started were best friends, and maybe I would say so. Absolutely.
They started to smell it after a while, and I know Jennifer Aniston was the one that said things to him the most, like, I know you're drinking because I can smell it, and then he would say, oh my gosh, I thought I was hiding it better, but it never went any further than that. You need to stop. Okay, I'll stop. And then you just don't. It's a scary disease, the disease of addiction. Your father had it to everything, though. He was addicted to things too. He was addicted to sports. He was addicted to gambling. He was addicted to yogurt. I mean, cookies,
full loaves of bread.
He was an extremist. I mean, he had an addictive personality. And that's kind of an interesting topic. Like, if you have an addictive personality, is there a difference between, is everyone who's an addict, do they have an addictive personality too? Because maybe you're just addicted to one thing.
Maybe you just need a vice.
Yeah, but you're not addicted. You're not all or nothing with everything, whereas he was like all or nothing with just about everything in his life. Like you say, he couldn't just eat one yogurt. He would eat 12 or 24 or whatever in the refrigerator.
Oh my God.
Like, who eats
so
24
crazy.
Yogurt?
Like, why yogurt specifically? Who likes yogurt that much?
And cookies and the pizza. He would eat
a loaf of toast.
Yeah, he would eat 3 Bill's pizzas, double-deckers, like big double-decker ones, all 3 of them.
Yeah,
in one
binge.
sitting, and like, he just had this personality that was like that, and same thing with sports, same thing with his thoughts. His thoughts were addictive. They would spin,
Oh yeah, he was addicted to fighting for sure. Big time.
So I don't know. It'd be nice if there was a pill for everybody that has addiction, because it does cause a lot of problems in our world.
What's something we can learn from Matthew Perry's story?
Yeah. That is a good question, because his whole goal is, like, if he can just help one person, it's worth the book, which is what we said about our book too. But what can we? I mean, he's not really helping us per se. except for to talk about addiction more on the show and just talk about it. I've been talking all week about it, and maybe it's bringing some awareness to people. Maybe they can spread the word, talk more with their kids, recognize things more with their kids. Gratitude, secrets. Okay, that was a big one. He said, we are not supposed to be alone as creatures. We are supposed to be around other people. Now, you can be alone sometimes, but we're not supposed to be alone always. And he said that in the interview and in the book. You have to reach out. If you're hurting, you have to reach out. You can't do it alone. You have to talk to people. You have to have people around you. You have to.
I think even people that are like alone all the time that aren't addicted to anything they start to find other problems.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Within themselves or whatever, but you just start to like.
The mind just goes.
You can't be that isolated,
And that's why they put people in solitary confinement in prisons, and they go crazy. I mean, you can't live, but he said, I like the way he says, don't try to be alone, try to talk to people about anything. It doesn't even have to be about addiction, but just anything. You can't do it alone.
Yeah. I think a good learning takeaway from this is that just because a person is an addict doesn't mean they are a bad person.
Okay, that's a great takeaway.
Can they be bad people? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's definitely examples of addiction causing them to do bad things and everything, but that doesn't mean that the person themselves is just inherently bad because they're addicted.
And you can't. They're not weak either. You can't talk yourself out of addiction. Like my dad,
it's your body. It's like, to them, it's like if you didn't get enough food for the day and you need food, they need this drug until they can get themselves off of it.
Yeah, they can't.
It's a need. It's not a want.
Yeah.
And it's.
Whereas my dad would say stuff to your dad. Okay, I'm getting confused again. So Grandpa
That's my dad,
would say stuff to Ken like, well, just stop. Like when he was having problems with alcohol, just stop.
Right.
You can't just stop if you're an addict. This doesn't work. But my dad wasn't an addict. So he could just stop. If he didn't want to eat anything anymore, he would just stop eating it,
Yeah. And he was a Wisconsin boy, so he knew how to hold his drinks.
Yeah,
and stuff,
he did, but it didn't consume him, and he didn't have to have more and more and more and more. And if he wanted to stop, he stopped.
Right.
And even Grandma was pretty good at holding her alcohol.
Well, she's a Wisconsin gal. She knows what's up. Yeah. They were both from small town Wisconsin where it's too cold to be sober. So, of course, they're going to be drinking.
They got a hail in Madison yesterday. Did you hear about that?
I did. My friends...
was it yesterday or Thursday? Whatever. But
I saw some of my friends' Snapchat stories where they were like, oh, the first day I parked my car outside the garage and a hailstorm. I'm sorry to my friends that happened to, which is unfortunate timing,
Yeah. Wisconsin, though. Well, anyway, we can probably get off that topic because it's kind of depressing. Not that we usually
talk cars in a hailstorm.
No, Matthew Perry, but not that our topics are really ever not depressing. We're talking about mental health.
I'm talking about mental health, but
mental illness, but
it's to bring more of an awareness to it, and I think this is why we always talk. I mean, we've talked about this. This is why we do the show, is so that we can talk about the stuff that is not inherently pretty. Well, and in life, because there's a lot of it.
And he said that too to Diane Sawyer. He said, I don't like doing this interview. I don't like this topic. I don't want to sit here and talk about it, especially because it's me.
To like millions of people.
Right.
Yeah.
But he said, I think we have to.
Yeah.
Because it's a problem,
Yeah.
And just so you know, when he married Monica on the show, he was completely sober. And he had been for like 6 months or something. It was a perfect weight. He looked really good. And so how they watched the one clip together, Diane and him, and he said that was hard to watch. Well, then at the end, they showed the clip of him marrying Monica, and he's like, I could watch that over and over again because he was so healthy.
Yeah.
And he married Monica.
Yeah, or his character did. But,
yeah, exactly.
But, I mean, that is a good moment in the show, too. So.
God, I don't know how he did it, man. And he did a movie while he was in the show and the other movies. And
he was in 17 again with Zac Efron. He was supposed to be, and this is always blows my mind how people think in Hollywood. 17 again is about this guy that he's 17, or he's like 30 something, 34 or something like that. And then he gets transported into his 17-year-old body. So Matthew Perry was like the 34-year-old. And then Zac Efron is like supposed to be what Matthew Perry looked like when he was 17, which is so
really
hilarious. You know who Zac Efron is?
Yeah,
right?
I do. He was in The Greatest Showman.
He's like objectively one of the most handsome.
Oh yeah.
And he just has the perfect Ken doll look.
Those eyes.
And Matthew Perry was supposed to be him in the future, which I think is hilarious.
Okay, so that didn't quite go, did it? Because let's see how he was when he was 17 or around there in this.
I'm not saying he was ugly.
Like there?
It's not bad.
It's not bad, but
Zac Efron is pretty a high standard of guy.
God,
he's not a bad standard, but Zac Efron's just so above in the looks department anyway.
Yeah. He was, yeah. But yeah, he was pretty cute here.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could link some like addiction resources.
Definitely, and they
in this episode, and
they do talk about that with at the end of the show. It's like, if you're suffering from addiction, call this number and stuff. So we could link those that they put at the end of the Diane Sawyer and the George Stephanopoulos interview.
Mm-hmm.
He's going all over. He's going to be on the Kelly and Ryan show and The View, and
right.
Must be hard for him to do all that, but he's doing it.
Well, I think I'd like to offer that to our listeners and stuff too. Like, if you need to reach out to someone, do it. You know, like, and also if you want to tell us about your story and stuff, we would be happy to listen, even off the air or whatever. But like,
true.
If you need to talk to someone, like, we're here.
Yeah, we're here, and people have said when they come on our show that it feels like a marathon therapy session.
You really get to know people that way. I think when you get to their nitty gritty of their soul, like, and you find out all the stuff that's like not. You would probably skip over if you were just an acquaintance.
Yeah, well, you would never be like, so what are you about? Do you have demons? Like, when you first meet someone.
Tell me all your backstory. Tell me all the shit you've been through, and then we can talk, okay? Yeah.
So, for instance, we do have a guest coming on whose daughter hung herself in her closet when she was 14 years old. Ugh. Well, would you go up to somebody and say right away, so, do you have a kid that hung herself?
Oh, my God.
Like... Even if you knew it, you still wouldn't bring it up, right?
Right.
So, but she's willing to share her pain about that,
and that's
pretty amazing. And we have we got a nice lineup of people. I do want to have a discussion about hospice now that I've been able to clear my head as to what happened with Terry. It's been 6 months, a little over 6 months since Terry died.
Yeah.
And hospice really let me down, and that's very common according to the person that we hired to come in and help at the end, because it wasn't hospice that was helping. I needed to hire others, and they said that they often find that hospice is very confusing to people, and I think we should bring a light to it, because maybe it'll help someone know what question to ask if they have a loved one going into hospice. And then lots of other ideas for the future.
Yep.
I actually have a Winnie the Pooh just like that at home, so we might even do a Winnie the Pooh episode.
I got this as a wedding gift, and I think it's great. So Jan Lee should thank you.
Yeah.
I think this is really wonderful, and the book along with it.
And the card.
And of course the card.
Card was so heartfelt, and the book had a nice message in it, and then there's always very generous
very
things.
Grateful. So yeah, I think we can wrap it up. We'll link some resources that we find beneficial as people who have experienced addiction in our past and with our family members, and we'll link some stuff like that in the description, and that's all we got for today.
That's all we got. But Katie has to go do some kind of Thanksgiving thing, and it's only November 5th.
Yep. So we will see you next time.
But this sounds fun. It's going to be fun. So, yeah.
That's what I do. I have fun.
Me too. All right. Until next time, subscribe on Patreon, please.
Give us a follow, comments on our channels. We would love to hear from you and hear how our content is.
Yes, please.
We always want to improve it. So.
Yep. Okay. Toodles.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.